Here and elsewhere, the project calls for the construction of the Wallasey Island Research Institute to transform the engineered wetland into a laboratory for the studies and deployment of future reparation zones, as future construction should demand parallel reparations. On my visit to the Isle of Portland, I saw a landscape scarred by the simultaneous hollowing of the island's quarries and the layering of its offcuts. The scale of Portland's material absence is not comprehensible by the immediacy of the land around it, but only by way of recounting the limestone structures saturating the City of London. Displaced for over 400 years, the island is one of the UK's largest source of construction limestone, but the decline of solid limestone construction has replaced stone masonry with cement and cladding production that today accounts for more than 90% of the island's output. As a royal manor, the moving of royal land historically symbolized a transfer of authority, extracted only for the construction of seats of power in the city, governing religious, financial, and development priorities. In the last century, the shift from sea-based to land-based transportation incentivized the pulverization of limestone into cement, requiring the grinding of 2 tons of limestone for every ton of cement, while breakages from the slicing of large dimension stone into thin, lightweight cladding produced 90% wastage during fabrication. Quarrying, the act of squaring natural stone, extract terrains into unfinished cities, giving cities the illusion that Earth do not exist. This is a map of London's remaining Portland stone building, although today limestone largely arrives at the city's construction site in the form of cement mixes. If London is the inversion of Portland, then the Wallasey Island Natural Reserve is the inversion of London. The 269-hectare island nested in the River Crouch Delta near the coast of Essex is a reparation zone built to undo the destruction of urban construction. Built from 4.5 million tons of waste soil excavated from Crossrail's tunneling, the construction of the island turns cities into sites of extraction for reparative landscapes, reversing a long-standing supply chain of urbanization by extraction through the creation of reparation zones. To rehabilitate a land twice the size of the City of London, more than 2,000 large boatloads of soil was shipped over 100 kilometers from central London to Wallasey Island. The soil was used to raise the topography originally sitting 2 meters below sea level, so the existing seawall can be breached to allow periodic flooding of the island while tidal regulating dams and saline lagoons monitor the salinity of the island's soil and inland waterways. Wallasey Island is the inversion of London, which in turn is the inversion of Portland. And in the century of carbon neutrality, extraction for urban construction here should demand the building of reparation zones elsewhere. Therefore, the construction of the institute itself should become a part of the process of reparation, by challenging modern stone manufacturing and designing with large dimension stone in order to reduce waste and overall carbon emission. As rainwater washes the limestone surface, calcium runoff settles on the ocean floor, forming new layers of limestone sediments while decreasing the acidity of the wetland and surrounding ocean, allowing the landscape to sequester more carbon from the atmosphere by enhanced weathering. The Institute would extend the landscape into a sequence of limestone structures, hosting residences, laboratories, and a library for the long-term preservation of the island's soil, water, and vegetation samples. Wallasey Island is not a naturally occurring wetland, but rather meticulously engineered and maintained by a network of urban machines. Its fragility and artificiality allow for its environment to be controlled, altered, and monitored, providing an ideal testing ground to institutionalize the production of future ecological infrastructures and for the deployment of reparation zones everywhere. The weaponization of institutionalized techniques takes lessons from the painful history of the Portland prison, where the Convict Public Works was founded in the 1850 to institutionalize the exploitation of prisoners into quarrymans, providing 10,000 tons of stones a week for the new Royal Navy base at Portland Harbor. The prison, became an institute for the mass exportation of construction knowledge, as prisoners were sent to British colonies and forced to settle the New World with their acquired skills. The use of solid limestone construction can only be economically viable by reviving the maritime trade route that put Portland's stone industry at a geographical advantage to UK's inland limestone deposits 3 centuries ago. The act of shipping royal stones away from the city to Wallasey Island will signify a bifurcation of urbanization priorities towards the production of reparation zones. The construction of the Research Institute is based on the deployment of solid limestone vaults, prefabricated in Portland, where the offcuts can be processed into reconstituted stone blocks, thereby reducing the total raw stone requirements. Portland dimension stones are increasingly mined underground and processed with diamond wire cutters, where the offcuts can be reused as explored in early tectonic experiments, cut as an over-dimensioned habitable wall for landscape observation, where the offcuts can be flipped into columns to support a viewing platform atop the seawall. To minimize stone use and maximize living space, the habitable wall was compressed into a series of arches and three-dimensionalized by forming intersections defined by a lost corner. Therefore, the tectonic is not scalable in itself, but rather its spatial possibility lies in its multiplication. 3 types of intersections were developed based on different geometries of keystone. The result is a square that bifurcates a space equally in all 4 directions, an isosceles triangle that splits a single space into 2, and a right-angled triangle that combines tectonic A and B. Their intersections becomes multi-directional transition spaces deployed to organize larger rooms beyond. As visitors walk towards the island, the soil library appears at the intersection of the jetty and the seawall, projecting from 2 sets of arches into an expanded horizontal view of the island, allowing for a moment of orientation upon arrival, while the reconstituted stone ramp provides public access to the roof. Further along the footpath sits the researcher's residence, walled off entirely on one side to avoid the eyes of wandering visitors. The residence is layered with living quarters on one side and shared communal programs on the other. The rooms are partitioned by intersecting vaults dressed with thick curtains that can be drawn for larger gatherings, hosting educational workshops on the construction of miniaturized ecologies. 3 courtyard buildings sit adjacent to the residence, facilitating indoor laboratories and semi-enclosed outdoor facilities for wetland fieldworks. Cut by a bifurcating seawall, the laboratories, in contrast to the residence, is oriented towards the public footpath, whereby the workings of the laboratory's front end is entirely open to public view, while the offices towards the back steps down by a meter following the existing slope, gaining greater privacy. Cities give the illusion that Earth do not exist. Sustained by extraction of remote quarries, and blinded by the efficiency of the modern supply chain, the design of our cities is the simultaneous destruction of distant landscapes, abandoned without consequences. Therefore, construction should demand parallel reparations and rethink the impact of building here on landscapes and environments elsewhere. Built with displaced stone on an island of displaced land, the Wallasey Island Research Institute will activate the island into a laboratory for the future deployment of reparation zones. The construction of the institute rejects urbanization by extraction, transforms cities into inversions of reparation zones, and questions the role of construction in giving back to the environment.